evening, I was looking at some pictures that I had taken on one of my early trips to LA, and then I went out on this trip, and I went to sort of all of those the iconic venues and all of that. And I was at the Rainbow, and I remember meeting Mario, and he was quite fascinated
Uh,
that there was this kid from India that had come,
oh, I
all the
bet.
way to this trip and sort of knew all these stories and all these people, and he invited me to have a glass of wine with him. So
Oh, that's great. Now, Mario, it was really cool because the guy that did my story on Yahoo, he mentioned that part about Mario and the rainbow, and
yeah,
and he that was really cool. Like that's he's so iconic, Mario. For
mhm.
in our circle.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
and
was,
it's
I
it's
was,
crazy because that story that's in my Yahoo was when Mario passed away. That's when me and Steven, we had this one. It was the last time that me and
Mhm.
Steven really had this incredible thing together that me and him had was experience together. Me and Steven was when he actually told me for the first time that he knows what I did. It was when it was the same day Mario died, and we went to the Rainbow to go see the family because we're
yeah,
very close to them, and we went up to my car and we were smoking a joint, and that's when Steven told me. He says, "I know why you did what you did, and thank you."
yeah,
And when he told me that was all I ever needed. Because he would never say it today. You know what I mean? He won't admit it today.
yeah.
But when it was just me and him, and he was completely sober, I mean, besides the weed, he gave me the credit that I always wanted from my big brother because that's all I ever wanted to do. Just
Yeah,
like think about it, you're a huge fan. You just said I'm a huge fan. Imagine if that guy's your brother,
I
and
can.
it's just
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
right, I say, everybody has an idol. Like everybody idolizes somebody when you're a kid. It
yeah,
could be your brother. It could be your father. It should be. It should not be Kim Kardashian. It should be your father, your brother, someone very close to you that you look up to. Well, mine happened to be my brother,
yeah,
who turned out to be the biggest rock star in the world at one point.
yeah,
That's the only difference, you know. Um, but no, listen, man. Let's dig into it.
yeah,
I watched a little of your format. It's pretty laid back. It's cool. I
yeah,
saw you had some good guests on it.
yeah,
Steve Vai, I saw. You had some good stuff, man. So I'm
yeah.
honored that you invited me to come
Thank
on
you.
your podcast. So thank you,
Thank you,
Vic.
Jamie. Thank you, Jamie. So, just to sort of get into it, what was your life like growing up?
My life growing up was very normal. I mean,
Hmm.
up until the age of up until the age of 14, 15 years old, I came from a very middle class family. We lived in a nice little suburb in the San Fernando Valley called Canoga Park. I am a full on Valley boy, born and raised right by the Sherman Oaks Galleria where they shot that movie
Yeah.
Valley Girl or Valley Boy, whatever that movie is called, and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That was all where I grew up. Right around that whole area, and and I grew up in the Valley at the best time to live in the Valley back in the 80s. And my parents, they would still be married to this day if my father didn't pass away about 15 years ago. So I came from a great mom and dad. They I was raised like a single child, like an only child. My
Mhm.
brother Steven was 10 years older than me, and my other brother Kenny was 13 years older. So
Oh, okay.
by the time I was by the time I was 5, Steven already moved out of the house. He already ran away. Kenny, when he turned 18, he was gone too. So by the time I was 5, I was the only kid living in the house,
Mhm.
and it was just me and my mom, and I lived a very normal life.
Did you sort of
Playing
look up to
sports.
your dad?
Yeah, my dad was always my hero.
Hmm.
My dad, my dad took care of me. He taught me how to play basketball, taught me how to play baseball. He coached all my teams. he was the only father that hung out with with the kids. I Most kids at that age, they're embarrassed. Oh, daddy, leave us alone. Don't come play with us. No, I always wanted my dad to hang out with us. I always wanted me to be part of it. My dad was cool.
Hmm.
He let us be kids, and he taught us. My dad was, I did that story in Yahoo, and the writer actually said a nice, paragraph about my father. My father grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. My father was the only Jew that hung
Hmm.
out with all the Italians, and I'm talking about like the Italians, the mafia Italians in Cleveland, Ohio. And he was involved in underground gambling and booking
Wow.
and uh, and he used to share all these stories with me. And all the stories he shared with me, it actually came out in a movie called Kill the Irishman.
Yeah, I was going to
It was
ask you
about
about that. Yeah.
Danny. Yeah, it was about Danny Green, and
Hmm.
he ran the union in Cleveland, Ohio. And my dad's best friend was this guy Mike Fredo, and Mike Fredo was actually in the movie, and Danny Green shot Mike Fredo. But my dad would tell me all these stories, um, when he was young, and
Hmm.
uh, and how his friends got blown up in cars and went to jail, and that's why he ended up leaving Cleveland, Ohio. My dad ended up leaving Cleveland, Ohio, and chased my mom, who was moved to Los Angeles, and with her two boys, which was my two brothers. Uh, and my dad moved to Los Angeles and left Cleveland, Ohio, and got away from all that. And my dad says that if he didn't leave Cleveland, Ohio, he would have been dead within a year because all of his
Wow.
friends were either blown up or shot. And and that's that. These are the stories that my dad was sharing with me when I was 8 years old at nighttime when I had to go to sleep. So of course I'm gonna grow up, and when I'm in my 20s and 30s, I'm going to live a very similar life, being
Hmm.
involved in gangster rap, and that's where
Yeah.
that's where I went to. I went into gangster rap music,
Yeah.
so there's definitely parallels there. But yeah, my
Yeah.
dad was the best. I love my dad.
Wow. Yeah, he must have had some stories to tell, wouldn't he?
And he had my dad was literally on the my dad was on the side on the corner with all the Italians, and on the other corner was all the blacks. And my dad was there the day when Don King, the famous boxing promoter,
Promoter, yeah.
actually killed somebody. Yeah, he actually killed somebody on the corner, and my dad was there. He was on the other
Wow.
side. So, and that's just one of the stories he shared with me, and I thought he was kidding. I thought my dad would make up these stories, and it was all a bunch of BS.
Yeah.
Until this movie, Kill the Irishman, came out about 10 years ago, and I'm watching this movie, and every story he told me was in this
Okay.
movie. And that's how
Wow.
I knew what he was telling me was all true.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm glad that my dad was smart enough to escape that and move out to Los Angeles and end up having me and and my father dedicated his entire life to me. My mom wanted to have another baby. She's like, Melvin. My dad's name was Mel. And
Yeah.
she says, why don't we have another baby? And he says, no, I don't want any other kids. I want to give everything to my son, to Jamie. And my father, he also adopted Kenny and Steven, my older brothers, when they were 7 and 10. He
Mhm.
legally adopted them. That's why we all have the same last name. And I believe that my father tried to be there and tried to be the best father he could be to Steven and Kenny as well. And they might have not wanted to be that close to him because of whatever they were going through, but my dad did the right thing. He adopted them and he tried to raise them as if they were his own. And that's what
Mhm.
I always
Mhm.
saw at home. So yeah, I had a
Amazing.
great man. I had a great childhood. I was raised by two great parents. So I've never had an excuse to go over the edge. I never had an excuse to go too deep into anything bad. I'm so grateful that I was never involved in any sexual abuse, physical
Yeah.
abuse, uh, any of that stuff growing up, what I hear about all the time, on TV and stuff. But I was raised, it was incredible because, people always say, like, how did Steven go all the way over there and you're all the way over here? Well,
Yeah.
luckily, I was raised with two parents. Stephen and Kenny, they they never knew their father. Their father abandoned them when Stephen was a baby and Kenny was 3 years old.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
they never knew their father.
Yeah,
So that makes a big difference, you know. So I
it
grew up
does. Yeah.
with two parents that never got divorced, that showed a lot of love at home, and I'm very grateful for that. And I that's why I love being a father so much to my three children because I want to give them exactly what my father gave me and even more.
Yeah, that's so good to hear, right? And that you've sort of learned from them the value of family and what it means to sort of be together for your kids.
Yeah, and also especially moving to Australia and
Hmm.
seeing how the family values are in Australia and how the togetherness that the families have out here. And I happen to marry an Asian woman, a Chinese girl, and the Chinese culture, families, everything. And I never really grew up around that. Like I have aunts and uncles and cousins, but I was never too close with all of them.
Hmm.
I was only close to my parents. So living out here in Australia, my children have so many cousins and aunts and uncles and family, and we're together with family every day, and it's incredible. I got very very lucky, man.
Yeah, yeah. It's very Chinese culture is very similar and very close to Indian culture, where the emphasis is on family and uh, sort of staying
Completely.
together and very, very close in lots of aspects, actually.
Nothing else matters in life but your family. That's something I've realized as I got older. It
Yeah,
doesn't matter what I do for a living. Doesn't matter how much money you have. Family and
absolutely.
health. Family and health is everything.
Absolutely. Tell me, Jamie, how did Stephen get into music? You said he left home quite early. How did he get into music? Was it because he met Slash? I've read stories of how he met Slash at high school.
Um, well, the way Stephen got into music was my mom took him to Magic Mountain to go see that rock band Kiss play in the '70s, and it was actually the concert where they did that where they shot that movie. I forgot what the movie's called, but it was literally shot at the in Magic Mountain, Six Flags Magic Mountain in Los Angeles, and that was Steven's first concert, and our mom picked him up, and he got in the car. He says, "Mom, I know what I want to do with my life. I want to be a drummer, just like Peter Criss."
Wow.
And from that day forward, that's what he did, you know. And and my parents would not allow him to have drums in our house,
Hmm.
so he got a drum set, and he would go set up at the park, and he would practice at the park. He would go to Chatsworth Park and practice at the beginning, and and that's how he got into playing because of drums. He's the one that got Slash. Steven was already
Okay.
playing the drums. He met Slash, and he's the one. And Steven also had a guitar at his grandma's house, and he gave Slash the guitar. He taught him his first couple chords, and Slash was a natural, and he was off to the races too. So now Steven's on the drums, and Slash is playing guitar. And
Yeah,
then their other friend was Flea. Flea, I remember
from the
going to my
Peppers.
grandma's house from the Peppers, and Flea's playing the trombone or whatever one of those instruments is uh, outside on the balcony. Flea's playing over there. You got Tracy Guns over on the other corner. I mean, they all went to Fairfax High School. So you
Yeah,
got Perry Farrell over there with Dave Navarro. I mean, it was all around Fairfax in the 1980s. This is before any of these guys
yeah.
became the biggest rock stars in the world, and they were all just hanging out on Hayworth or Fairfax over there.
Did you go to the same school?
No, I didn't go to Fairfax because Stephen left home and moved in with our
Hmm.
grandma and grandpa in Hollywood. Right, they lived right across the street from Fairfax High, and I grew up in the Valley, and I went to Chatsworth High School. Stephen did go to Chatsworth um, for a little while, but then he ended up moving and went to Fairfax. But no, we didn't go to the same school.
Hmm.
Dana Strum went to my school, and his mother
Oh, you
was a
did?
teacher at my school.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Okay. Yeah.
his mom was a teacher at her. Dana Strum from Slaughter.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. But so you were sort of ringside when Steven and Slash were trying to put their band together. I think it was called Road Crew, right? They're one of the earliest sort of
yeah,
avatars of
for a
their band.
minute. Yeah, for a minute. I mean, I remember seeing Steven. There was a place called Pan Pacific Park. It's
Hmm.
actually where they shot that movie Xanadu with Olivia Newton-John. And I remember my mom picking me up from school and going over to that park and watching Steven play drums. He would set up they had an abandoned gymnasium. I remember that. Uh, but I don't remember the road crew. You know, I remember what I remember is I knew Slash as like Steven's friend. This is,
Hmm.
he was Saul. He used to be called Saul.
Saul. Yeah.
So we used to go to his house. I remember he had an apartment and he lived with his mom and his brother. His mom was Ola. I think she was a famous costume designer back in the days. Beautiful lady. And what the only thing I remember about that at that point was I would go in his toilet at Slash's house or his mom's house where he lived, and in the shower he had snakes. There were
Yeah.
snakes in there. I had to go pee. I would go pee, and I'm scared of snakes. I didn't even want to go in there, but
Most people
I
are scared of
remembered.
snakes. Yeah.
Yeah, especially I'm like, how old am I? I'm 8 years old. I'm maybe seven, and there's snakes in Saul's house. So he was always into snakes. This isn't something that just happened when he blew up as a big rock star.
Hmm. Hmm.
So he was having them back in the teens. But no, I don't remember Road Crew. Um, you know, but you got to remember, Steven was 10 years older than me, so he was up to a bunch of different things. I'm in the
Yeah.
valley, going to school, being a good kid, playing baseball and basketball. I don't know what the hell the guy's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, not until he started doing the Guns N' Roses thing.
Yeah.
Or it was Hollywood Rose. I remember it was Hollywood Rose at first. I remember the first thing was Hollywood Rose, but my mom was a waitress at Brent's Deli in Northridge, and she worked 3 days a week, and she was off on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So on Thursdays, she would pick me up from school. I'm in like fifth grade, fourth grade. She would tell me, "Don't tell Daddy. Don't tell Daddy. I'm going to pick you up from school, and we're going to go have lunch with Steven." And she would pick me up from school at 11 o'clock in the morning, and we would drive over the hill to Hollywood, and we would go pick up Steven. We would go out for sushi. I was having sushi at 8 years old, and then she would take Steven to the Guitar Center. She would buy him a couple of drumsticks. My mom had no money. She would save her tips. She maybe made
Wow.
30, $40 a day in tips. And we would go to Guitar Center, and she would go buy him a snare head or a drum head, drumsticks. And I remembered before Guns N' Roses, before my brother had a deal, before he even played his first real show, I was always so enamored by my brother. I would just always look up to this guy. You know, I was thinking about he had a motorcycle at one point. He had this old beat up 1970s motorcycle. And on Sundays we would have barbecues in the valley at our house. And I remember sometimes I would hear that motorcycle driving up the block, and I would run outside. And there's my brother with his blonde hair. They didn't wear helmets back then, just driving up the street and pulling into our driveway and just me running over to him. And I always looked up to my brother. This is before Guns N' Roses, like I said. He was my brother. That's my rock star brother, even though he wasn't a rock star then. But
Hmm.
he always had that he had that energy about him that you just knew something big was going to happen with
What's
this
gonna
guy. At
happen?
least I did,
Yeah.
and I always wanted to be around my brother,
Hmm.
you know. So
Yeah.
it was fun. It was cool, man.
What was the first Guns N' Roses show you attended? Do you have memories of that?
The first show I ever went to was it was the first show that they ever had was at Madame Wong's. I couldn't go because you had to be 21 or older. My parents went.
Mhm.
But their second show, if I'm not mistaken, it was at the Troubadour. And I went to that show. I went to every Guns N' Roses show from their second show to, let's say, their 12th show because they
Uh-huh.
only did maybe 10 shows. They might have only done 10 shows before they got that huge deal. Or maybe not a huge deal, but before they got their deal with Geffen with Tom Zutat when he signed them.
Mhm.
There wasn't they weren't around that long. You know, they I remember they played the Troubadour by the third or fourth show, they were already selling out. But
Yeah.
I do remember at that show Axel wearing chaps. I remember him wearing chaps, and you could see his bum cheeks. And my grandma was there, my mom's mom. My brother worshipped his grandma, and he
Yeah.
made sure that she was there, and she's front row.
Wow.
And Axel turns around, and there's his bum wearing chaps. And my grandma, her face dropped. My everyone's face. We've never seen anything like this, you know. And it was incredible. But as soon as I saw them for the very first time, I went to school the next day, and I told everybody. I said, "Man, my brother is going to be the biggest rock star in the world."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would tell people that. And I remember I bought a Guns N' Roses shirt. I remember or I either bought it or they gave it to me. But I had a Guns N' Roses, the very first Guns N' Roses shirt ever. It was the logo with the guns going out with the flower with the roses, and it said Guns N' Roses written on the bottom. And I wore that shirt daily. And I would tell everybody, "This is my brother's band. They're going to be the biggest band in the world." Everyone thought I was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
You must have been
I
quite
fooled
the
them.
Yeah, but you must have bbeen quite the sort of rock star in school as well, right? Given that you were Steven Adler's brother. You must have got a lot of
I mean,
attention.
I it was incredible, man. Like, um, so I remember going to school. The first day in seventh grade, my first time going to a public school. I went to private school all the way up until sixth grade. Seventh grade, my dad says, "Hey, I'm gonna throw you out in the wool with the wolves. You need to learn what life is really all about. I'm pulling you out of private school. You're going to public school." I show up to school and I'm wearing a jean jacket that Axl Rose's mom she painted for me. Her name was Sharon. She painted me on this. It was a denim jacket, and on the back it was the cross, the album cover of Appetite, and she painted this for me. I wish I still had it. It would probably be worth $1 million. And I'm wearing that jacket to school the first day, and this kid walks up to me. He says, "What's Guns N' Roses?" And I said, "It's my brother's band. They're going to be the biggest band in the world." And he's like, "Yeah, whatever." And I'm like, I could have called him a dick, but instead I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Adam." I said, "I'm Jamie." And I didn't know anybody at school that day. That was my very first time going to public school. I said, "Could I hang out with you?" And we started hanging out. And to this day, he's still one of my best friends to this day.
Wow.
But but we still talk about that story, how the first time we met each other and I told him they're going to be the biggest band in the world. He didn't believe me. And
Yeah.
they ended up being the biggest band in the world. But that was in seventh grade. So now eighth grade comes. Now eighth grade, a year later, "Sweet Child of Mine" it just came out on the radio, blowing up. Now my brother is the guy. "Sweet Child of Mine" #1, and Steven's home from I don't know where. Probably he was home from being on the road, and he calls me up the night before. He says, "Hey, I'm going to pick you up from school tomorrow." I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's exciting." So the next day at school, I see Adam. I say, "Adam, don't tell anybody. Steven's going to pick me up from school at the bike racks, which is on the side of the school over there. Don't tell anybody. After school, you come meet me over here at our locker, and we'll walk over and see Steven. You'll go meet my brother." So 3 o'clock comes, bell rings. I go to my locker. Here's Adam, and he has a couple friends. I'm like, dude, I told you, just you come. So he's like, nah, it's all good. I'm like, all right, let's go. So we start walking. Now, at the school, there's hallways that are going this way. That's where all the lockers are. And then there's a long hallway that's going this way. And that's the way towards the bike racks. So next thing you know, we're walking down the long hallway, and coming out of this way is there's 20 kids. We keep walking
Wow.
down. There's another hallway. There's 40 kids. We're keep walking. Next thing you know, Vic, I got 500 kids walking behind me, and we're marching to the bike racks. And I'm thinking, oh shit,
Oh,
what's my brother gonna think? I wasn't supposed to tell anybody. Oh shit, is there gonna be a riot breaks out? Or what if he doesn't show up?
yeah.
What if the guy doesn't show up? Oh my god! Like, and but the whole time, I got the biggest smile on my face, and inside, I'm just gushing with joy
I can
because these
imagine.
kids are
Yeah.
following me right now, right? And next thing you know, just like out of a movie, a monster truck. It's a monster truck pulls up. He's with his friend Brad, who owns a monster truck, and Steven gets out of the truck. And now there, here I am. I got the 500 kids with me. He jumps out. He starts giving hugs and kisses to everybody, all the girls. He's signing autographs. We didn't have cell phones, so there was no pictures being taken.
Yeah.
And this one girl, she literally fainted. She passed out right there. Um, it was definitely at that point in my life, it was the greatest moment that I ever witnessed at
I
that
can imagine,
in eighth
man.
grade. I mean, I felt like such a rock star. That definitely cemented my place in legendary status in the
In
San
this,
Fernando Valley at all the junior high schools. Okay, every junior high school was talking about it. It got around all the schools. Now, Vic, also keep in mind, I've always been a businessman, even as a young kid. So I had at my school, I was selling autographed pictures of Steven for $10 out of my locker.
wow. Okay.
I had friends at other schools selling autographed pictures of Steven. I had a whole business going. I mean, like out of our lockers in eighth grade. These are the things that we're doing, and it was phenomenal, man. Having a brother, I did an interview a few years back, and I said it's it's the same exact thing as if your brother is today's Justin Bieber. Imagine if your brother is Justin Bieber right now, and you go to junior high school. You got to be the coolest kid at school. Well,
Absolutely.
my brother was Guns N' Roses, and I'm not going to say I was the coolest kid in school, but I was definitely the most popular kid in the whole entire valley. Because not that I was the most popular because I had so many friends,
Hmm.
but I was because I considered myself having hardly any friends because I kept my circle so tight because I didn't want to be friends with people just because my brother's a rock star. I
Yeah.
I gravitated towards all my friends that I had pre Guns N' Roses. Those are still my friends to this day. It was really hard for
Fantastic.
me to, yeah, right. It was really hard for me to open up my door and let people in because everybody wanted to be my friend, but for the wrong reasons. And I never wanted that. I just always wanted to keep my friends that were with me before Guns N' Roses. I knew I could trust them,
Mhm.
but I was definitely proud of my brother. I let it be known. Vic, I remember when I was in my teens. This is even after Steven got kicked out of Guns N' Roses. When I would introduce myself, I'd be like, "Hey, I'm Jamie Adler. My brother Steven Adler for Guns N' Roses." That's what I would say. Like when I look back on that, I'm thinking, like, what the hell was I thinking? But of course, I'm going to do that. If
Yeah.
you want everybody to know when you're a kid, when you're a
Without
teenager,
doubt.
you want
Yeah.
them to know to the point where the Hard Rock Cafe. You remember the Hard Rock Cafe? That was in the '80s. That was the biggest thing. The Hard Rock
Yeah.
Cafe was it. Okay, so they had this Hard Rock Cafe at the Beverly Center, uh, and me and my parents we would go eat there, and we would want to go there to hopefully one day see uh, a picture of Steven hanging on the wall, right? Like, because they had all the memorabilia, but nothing with Guns N' Roses. They just blew up. There's nothing hanging there, but we would go there. And we would go there enough that we met the general manager and we let the general manager know who we were. Hey, we're the Adlers. And the general manager was so impressed that he gave me the Hard Rock Express card. It was a gold credit card and it said Hard Rock Express. And what this card did was you could go to any Hard Rock in the world. And back then, the line to get in the Hard Rock to have dinner, you're
Yeah.
you're waiting at least 2 hours. You're waiting minimal 2 hours. But with this card, you walk right in. You don't wait for anything. You still have to pay for it, but you don't have to wait. And I had my Express card. That's what we would do on Friday nights. Me and my best friends, we would go find like ask girls out on dates or whatever, like 15, 16 years old, just so we could take them to the Hard Rock Cafe and walk to the front of the line and go to a table immediately, and
Yeah.
the girls be like so blown away and impressed. That's
Yeah.
how we were impressing girls back in the days with my Hard Rock Express card. But these are the things. This is what we were doing back in the late '80s, early '90s when your brothers in Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
You're not trying to stand in lines, and you want to impress people, in a fun way. And I took advantage of all that in a good way, Vic. Like I had a lot of fun. My friends had a lot of fun, and I guess that's why I ended up going into entertainment myself because I never wanted that fun to stop. You
Yeah.
know, I I didn't know any. I didn't. My dad worked for Southern Pacific Railroad. My mom was a waitress. I don't want to work for the railroad. I don't want to be a waiter. Let me follow my brother's footsteps. I have no rhythm. I can't play the guitar. I can't sing. So what's better? Let me go behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I'm a businessman. So I found my niche behind the scenes in showbiz, and I got very very lucky. But it all stems from growing up with my brother.
Yeah. But JB, what do you think it was about the five of them, right? Was it just because that's something that's, like I said, as a fan, I don't think that the sort of chemistry the five of them had has ever been replicated to this day when I watch, their shows on YouTube and, I saw them a couple of years ago. What do you think it was about the five of them? I mean,
Um,
I think you were there
no, I was there. No, listen, I was there, bro. I was there when they
during the
recorded Uzi
recording of
Suicide.
Appetite and all of that,
I was
right?
there every day. I was there every day when they recorded Appetite for Destruction.
Yeah.
Even
So
when my
was it was
brother
it was it
was no
the
longer
fact
there.
that they was it the fact that they lived together and sort of none of them really had much money back then? What was it? What was it about the five of them, you
All
think?
of that. Their chemistry has never been duplicated again and never will be. There's never been a five-piece rock band that came out swinging as hard as these guys did.
Yeah.
And it shows. And that's why I'll tell you what it was. It was authentic. It was real. It was dirty. It was messy. And that's what Guns N' Roses was. They were never fronting. They were never trying to be somebody that they weren't. They were just being themselves. And they never swayed for anybody they never strayed for anybody. They kept it real. And and that those they have to all five be together to work. You take Izzy out of the equation, it's no longer Guns N' Roses. You take Slash out of the equation, it's no longer Guns N' Roses. You take Steven out. That's why they were never able to get back to that level
Yeah.
after Appetite. Even though Use Your Illusions, which I personally think that those are great albums, obviously, and they sold millions of copies, but it was never Appetite. It didn't have that. It didn't have that feel. It didn't have that groove, that Steven groove. No matter what, everybody knows. Even each guy in Guns N' Roses knows. No one has the groove that Steven did that matches with the rest of the band.
Yeah.
What Duff is doing on the bass. Duff and Steven, that rhythm section is it. Those are the two guys. So you replace it with Matt Sorum, or you play so with Frank, it's a different rhythm section all the time. Not taken away from those guys because those guys are great musicians also. It's just something with those five guys, and you know, I mean, that's really the answer is why? Because they were so authentic. They were
Mhm.
so real. And that's Guns N' Roses. That's why Guns N' Roses will always be Axel, Slash, Duff, Izzy, and Steven. And nothing could ever match it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you were there with Steven the day he got sort of booted out the band. That was
Yeah,
1990, right?
I was definitely there when I was definitely there when Doug Goldstein called the house. This is a really good road story right here. So Dr. Feelgood, Motley Crue, they're on Dr. Feelgood tour, and they were like my favorite band. Besides Guns, I love Motley Crue. Steven, Steven was really good friends with Tommy Lee. I went to Tommy Lee's house on New Year's Day one year. I think it was like 1988, and he taught me how to ride a dirt bike. Tommy Lee did. I hung out with Heather Locklear. It was an incredible New Year's Day. And now Motley Crue is going to be playing at the Forum, Dr. Feelgood tour, and we're going. Steven's taking me. It's just going to be me and Steven. We're going to go see Motley Crue for my first time. And of course, Steven's going to come out as a special guest because that's what they always used to do back in the days. They would bring Steven out as a special at the very end, like as an encore. And it was like a huge deal. So Steven would come out playing the drums. But this night, my mom drops me off at the house. So excited. There's a white limo out front. I can still picture it to this day. The long white stretch limo. I go inside. Steven's in the shower. He's getting ready. I hear the shower on. I'm watching TV. The phone rings. The phone was in the kitchen. I run over there. I pick up. And it's Doug Goldstein. Hey, Jamie, can I speak to Stevie? I'm like, he's in the shower. He's like, yeah, it's really important. You got to go get him. I'm like, okay. So I go pound. I'm like, yo, it's Dougie. He says it's really important. You got to come out. Comes out, puts a towel around himself. I remember he's dripping. Comes to the kitchen. Hey, Dougie, what's up? And then his face, he went from, hey, Dougie, to just like emptiness, complete emptiness. And I look, I'm like, what's up? What's up? What's wrong? He's like, shows off. We're not going tonight. I just got kicked out of Guns N' Roses. I just got fired. What? What do you mean? What do you mean we're not going tonight? Steven, what are you talking about? Who cares? Ah, you're not kicked out of Guns N' Roses. Get the fuck out of here. We're going to Motley Crue. Let's go. He went in the bathroom. He locked himself in there and he didn't come out for hours. He did not come out. I had to call my mom. Me, I'm what, 15. I was just devastated we weren't going to Motley Crue. I was so excited to see Motley Crue, and I didn't believe that he got kicked out of Guns N' Roses. It just didn't make sense to me. I couldn't fathom it, and that's what happened. But what the fans and nobody knows, and I remember this call too, was they were doing. So Steven's out of the band. Okay, he's out. This is while they were recording that the Use Your Illusions, which Steven did demo the whole both albums of Use Your Illusions. There are demo tapes out there. So You Could Be Mine, the beginning, that Steven wrote all that. Never get that twisted. The whole world should know that. That was not Matt Sorum. Matt Sorum duplicated what Steven did. Steven, and I love Sorum. Sorum's my boy. I actually put Steven and Sorum together as friends. I had a meeting with those two guys outside one day on Beverly Boulevard, and they hugged each other, and they've been friends ever since. But no, Steven definitely he wrote all those drum tracks for Use Your Illusions, all that. But there was a time that after he got that call from Doug, a few months later, they were going to do Rock and Rio. Guns N' Roses ended up doing Rock and Rio, and they couldn't. They wanted Steven back because whatever was going on with Storm or whoever was playing drums for them, they just were not happy. And they knew that it wasn't Adler. And they did call Steven. They said, Steven, if you could pull your shit together, this is after they did so this is after they did Farm Aid. They did Farm Aid, and that was kind of the last straw. When Steven
Yeah.
fell off the drum set at Farm Aid, that was it. It was done at that point, right? But then months later, they couldn't find a drummer they weren't happy with, and they reached out to Steven and they gave him another chance. That's all Steven had to do was get off drugs, and he'd be back in Guns N' Roses. He could have been back in. But that's how powerful this disease is. This disease is willing to take everything away from you.
Yeah.
You could get it all back, but sometimes you choose this disease, this drugs. You choose these drugs over your dream, over everything you've worked so hard for. And unfortunately, my brother was so addicted, and obviously he had so much pain inside, probably from growing up and the things he went through as a kid, that he just couldn't get off the drugs. But they did give him a shot. I do remember that. I'm like, man, you can get back in Guns N' Roses. Now I was too young. I was 15 years old, 16 years old, but it was at that point where I would say this out loud. I'm like, man, someone needs to kidnap this guy. Someone needs to hold Steven hostage up and get him off these drugs. And whenever he wants to do drugs again, beat the shit out of him. That's what
Yeah.
needs to happen. And this is what I was saying, but I couldn't do it because I was too young. But I was thinking these things because if I was older, you best believe I would never have let this guy get kicked out of Guns N' Roses because I would have held him hostage. And every time he wanted to do drugs, no, he's not doing it because he would have security around him. He would have access to no money, no car. And that's what I would have done. But I mean, at the same time, you can't force somebody to get off drugs that doesn't want to get off drugs. I
Yeah.
guess
Yeah.
that's what they
Yeah.
say, and I mean there is truth to that. But Guns N' Roses did give him a shot. He didn't have to leave the band, but he definitely, unfortunately, he did choose the drugs over Guns N' Roses and over everything else, unfortunately. And it's not
Yeah.
just my brother. Let's be honest. There's a lot of people out there that choose drugs over success. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. But I think Steven's one of the lucky ones to sort of come through an addiction this bad, right? Um,
I
like,
but my brother's the luckiest guy to ever live. Okay, so I was
yeah.
thinking, your show is called Tales from the Road, right? So I was trying to think of some really cool road stories. So speaking about all this and how lucky Steven is, so I was the guy that was representing. I reunited like Rat and Warrant. This is like in
Yeah.
1988. I mean 1998, 1999. I literally was booking all these groups, right? And all those bands from the 80s, Bullet Boys. My first ever tour I did was called the Hard Tour. It was Bullet Boys, Pretty Boy Floyd, Enough's Enough, and Bang Tango. That was my first ever tour. I'm a booking agent. That's what
Mhm.
I've been doing since 1998. My first tour was the Hard Tour. It was those four groups. And a few years later, I put together this other tour called Bad Boys of Metal. My old business partner, Chuck Bernal, over at Artists Worldwide, that's where I was working at the time. And it was called Bad Boys of Metal Tour. It was Janie Lane, Kevin DeBro, and Steven Adler, the voice of Quiet Riot, the voice of Warrant,
Warrant. Yeah.
Steven Adler from Guns N' Roses, the Bad Boys of Metal Tour. This was in, I want to say maybe around 2004. I don't know. You could Google it. It's all over the internet. It was definitely a crazy, wild tour. So within the first couple of weeks of that tour, Janie Lane, he just could not stop drinking. He walked off the tour. Janie walked off the tour. Janie was a very good friend of mine. Okay. He disappeared. He had a really, really bad drinking problem. He's gone off the tour. No one could find him, right? The guys, they end up landing in Santa Ana. We got a show at the Galaxy, so that's the first show that's close to home for me. So Chuck and I, we go to the Galaxy show, and there's the tour bus. I walk over to the tour bus, and there's Kevin DeBro. DeBro pulls me aside. He's like, yo, Jamie, I got to talk to you, man. So it's just me and DeBro. He's like, I want you to know, I'm about to walk off this tour. Your brother, he's just partying too much. He's smoking too much. There's weed. I can't have that around me for my vocal cords. I don't know what else he's doing, but it's just too hectic on the tour bus. This is not what I signed up for. This is not supposed to be a party. That's all your brother wants to do is party. Jamie already left the tour. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, dude, like, Kevin, come on, man. We only had a couple weeks left on this tour. I said, you can hang in there, please. And we ended up getting through that tour. DeBro got through the tour, and Adler got through the tour, and everything was fine. And but it was messy. I'm telling you, this is one of the messiest tours I've ever been involved in. And Steven was being Steven on this tour, obviously. So fast forward a couple years later, freaking DeBro dies, overdose on cocaine. I was his agent when he passed. The newspapers were calling me up for a comment. And you could Google it. You could Google it. There's a comment where I said, "There's no way," because it didn't come out right away how he died. But the journalist asked me, did he die from drugs? I'm like, the bro, he liked to have a little wine at nighttime, but he's not doing cocaine. This guy would not. He didn't die from drugs. He was healthy. He would run. He was real. He was an active guy, DeBro. Man, sure enough, the toxicology report came out, accidental cocaine overdose. Then after that, they find Janie Lane dead in a hotel room from alcoholism. I was just with Janie 2 weeks before he passed away. Okay, and he died from drinking. And who's still alive to this day
Yeah.
is my brother. How the heck? How did everyone die? Mike Starr, he was on Celebrity Rehab with him. Tom Sizemore, he was on Celebrity Rehab with him. I mean, just countless other people. Everyone's died, and
Yeah.
Steven is still alive. You would think he would be the first one that would die.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my brother is beyond lucky. The bro, Kevin DeBro, just talking so much shit about Steven. He's a fuck up. Da da da. I'm like, just chill, DeBro. Just get through this fucking tour. Well, he was a hypocrite because he
Yeah.
died from drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that have passed judgment on my brother, and said a lot of things, and they're no longer here because they were doing drugs too. And somehow, some way, my brother is a survivor.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
has he doesn't have 9 lives. He has 100 lives, my brother.
Yeah. Talking about Stephen being lucky, I remember reading in his book, he had said, I think that he had overdosed 28 times in sort of three botched suicide attempts, a couple of heart attacks, and all that. I mean, just to live through all that and sort of touch wood, still be around is quite something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how he's done it, but I always said that God has a bigger plan for my brother, and you know, Stephen Stephen would have, if he would have died, he would have died, 10, 20 years ago, whenever he was really, really active on this on this stuff. But he survived and he lived, and luckily for me and for Stephen, I finally got my closure. And what my closure was for Guns N' Roses, because that's all I ever wanted, was to see my big brother, my hero, back on stage with Guns N' Roses again, right? So
Yeah.
finally in 2016, Steven performed with Guns N' Roses at Dodger Stadium, and I had to sneak into that show. I had to literally sneak into that, and I was front row, and I got to see my brother get up on stage. It's on my Instagram page at Worldwide Adler. Just scroll down, and there's Steven. Axelrose says, "Welcome to the stage." Mr. Steven Adler. And here comes Steven. And Dodger Stadiums, they just erupted. It was so incredible. I had tears coming out of my eyes. And I got to see Steven back on stage with Guns N' Roses. He did two songs that night. And and then Steven grabbed me from the side from the audience and he pulled me backstage and it was just me and Steven. We were sitting on the golf cart after he performed. The guys are still on stage performing. Steven just got off stage and I had my arm around him. I was like, I'm so proud of you, man. Like, I can't believe you just did that. You just got back up on stage at Dodger Stadium in our backyard with Guns N' Roses. Like, you did it. And that was really my closure. That was ultimately my closure because, I don't know. I doubt I'll ever see my brother on stage again with Guns N' Roses,
Mhm.
but at least I got that. At least I got that moment. That was good enough for me.
Yeah, was that also why you gave up being in rock and roll and then moved to sort of hip hop? Because you worked with Danzig, you worked with Black Label Society, you worked with all of these guys. You helped Steven put together a band, if I'm not mistaken, with Gilby.
Yeah, I mean that's why I was dealing with that's listen, the reason I went into showbiz was I wanted to help my brother because no one else was helping my brother. So let me figure out how this game works so I could help my brother navigate through this. And eventually I had success. I was representing, Zach Wild and Danzig and the Misfits and Motorhead. Man, I had a ridiculous I reunited Whitesnake. Who, if you can believe that, ask David Coverdale. I'm the guy that I was building with Coverdale's his attorney when he was living in Lake Tahoe. And Coverdale said to me on the phone, he says, if you could get me the right tour, I'll do it. And I got the tour with Scorpions. The Scorpions were at the agency that I was at, and we made it happen. It was Whitesnake and Scorpions. I think it was like 2002, 2003. And I literally reunited Whitesnake. It was, I mean, like, who would have ever guessed? I'm 25 years old at the time, let's say maybe 26. And but then I started having too much success. Someone comes up to me. They said the only reason you made it is because of your brother. The only reason you're doing what you're doing is because of your brother. At that point in my life, I wasn't bragging about my brother. I was too consumed with my own career. I didn't need to use Steven's name anymore. I already established myself. But when this guy said that to me, it crushed my ego. And I had to prove to myself and to everybody else that my brother is not the reason I have this success. I have this success. My brother could open up that door. That's all he
Yeah.
could do. He could open up a door, but it's up to me when I walk in that door. What do I do? Using that name and your last name and whoever your brother is, that only gets you so far. It's up to you to do what you're going to do in that room. And I knew what to do. And someone said that to me. And I said, you know what? I'm going to walk away from rock and roll. I proved myself. I did everything I could have ever imagined in rock and roll. I've done it. I even put Steven back. I put Steven with Thin Lizzy. His favorite group is Thin
Yeah.
Lizzy.
Yeah.
I was representing Thin Lizzy, John Sykes, um, and and I had Steven go rehearse with those guys. He could have made Thin Lizzy, but that's a whole other story. He could have been in the band, but I even got Steven to play with Thin Lizzy. But when someone told me that the only reason I made it is because of my brother, I walked away. I walked away from rock and roll, and my favorite rap group is Bone Thugs and Harmony, and I was actually representing Bone Thugs at the time. I said, you know what? I don't need anybody else. I got Bone, and I dropped all my clients. I walked away from everybody, and I went. Wait, I lost you. Hold on. I walked away from everybody, and I went into rap. I
Mhm.
went into the rap game. I walked away. I so here let's do a quick road story. Let's do a Danzig. Can we do a Danzig road story?
Absolutely.
So the Blackest of the Black, that started with me and Glenn. Glenn always wanted to do this Blackest of the Black festival. So we did it. I was finally able to make it work. I was able to book three Blackest of the Black shows. It was him, Superjoint Ritual, Behemoth. I forgot who else. I remember we did Universal Amphitheater. Man, it was
Wow.
awesome. I loved Danzig, right? Danzig was one of my favorites. And we really did a great things, like we were able to do this Blackest of the Black. And the first ever Blackest of Black was me and Glenn. So those were three very successful shows. And we would do a bunch of other shows. We would stay working. So Danzig's doing this one show in Arizona. And just like we always do, he's doing concerts, whatever, and he does a show in Arizona. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone rings. Hello? What the fuck are you doing to me? Fucking Glenn. Glenn calls me, and literally on that call, he fires me. Yeah, this is your fault. Da, da, da. And he fucking fires me. Well, this is the show where Danzig was on video, and that group that was supposed to play on the same festival, the same show with Danzig, punched him out. The legendary video of Danzig getting knocked the fuck out. That was my show that I booked. And
Wow.
because of that show, he fired me. Danzig fired me because he blamed inadequate security on me. It was my fault that there wasn't good security. But when you watch the video, you could see Danzig actually pushed the guy first. He set him up. This other group literally set Danzig up. You could tell it was a whole setup, but Danzig fell for the bait. He swung at the guy. The guy ducked. Bam, knocked Danzig out. Danzig went all the way down. Most embarrassing moment of Danzig's life. And I got fired over that. Well, if you go look at the timeline after that happened, Danzig didn't do any more shows after he got knocked the fuck out. I think it was like Tuba, Arizona or something. He didn't do any more shows. You didn't even hear about Danzig for years. The next thing that Danzig came out with was him and Doyle. That's when he brought Doyle back. And he started doing some shit with Doyle because he wanted everybody to forget that he got knocked out. He didn't want anyone talking about Danzig getting knocked out. Like that, like he's a 10th degree black belt. That should never have happened to Glenn.
Yeah.
But Glenn, he's a genius. He's a smart guy. Started doing the shows with Doyle, and the next thing you know, he put the Misfits back together. If Danzig never got knocked out, he would have never done that Misfits thing. But that was the only thing that Glenn could have done for everyone to forget about him getting knocked the fuck out.
Which
And
which
that's one
year
of
was
my
this, JB?
2003, 2004, maybe.
2003. Ah, okay. Okay.
I mean, you could Google it, man. There's a whole video. Danzig
Yeah.
knocked the fuck out. But that was my show. And I got fired over that, man. I really got fired over that. Listen, to this day, I'm not trying to put Glenn on blast. I love Glenn. But this is what artists do. They have to blame somebody. You understand? Like so normally the agent or the manager is the one who's going to end up getting fired, and get the blame put on them. It's hard for artists to take to accept responsibility for their own actions. So you got to blame someone else. So who's going down, the agent or the manager? But I always thought that's just an incredible, legendary story that nobody really knows.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but when you really look at the timeline, that's what ended up. That's why Danzig ended up putting the Misfits back together. So hallelujah, I'm glad that happened because the world wanted to see Glenn back with Jerry only.
Yeah.
They wanted to see that, and the Misfits have been selling out arenas. I mean, sure, I wish I was still involved with that, but someone had to take the fall, and it's cool. I'll be the fall guy.
Yeah. That's unfortunate. Yeah. Yeah. But I do recall watching Danzig, Glenn. I think it was 2015 in Germany. I was shooting a festival and they were playing there.
Man, I had some good times, man. Zach Wild was my favorite guitar player.
Yeah.
Like, besides Slash, Zach was my favorite guitar player. I got to meet Zach, for the first time when I was, like about 16 years old, 17, and then fast forward years later, I ended up
Yeah.
becoming, his agent. I was Black Label Society's agent. I was Danzig's agent. Todd Singerman is my mentor, my original mentor in the music industry, and he's been Motorhead's manager since the '80s. Todd
Yeah.
Singerman, real legendary rock manager. He took me under his wing, and he gave me Motorhead. He says, "Listen, you're Motorhead's agent now." And I represented Lemmy and Motorhead for probably, you know, 4 or 5 years of my life. So,
Yeah.
and I was in my mid 20s, so I had Motorhead, and like, who else can say that type of shit? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I sit here not being braggadocious. I say this because I still pinch myself every day. Like, what? I got to do that. I did this. I actually not only did I meet these people, but I actually represented them. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
the
it's
way I,
it's
the way I,
go ahead, go ahead.
bro, the
Sorry.
way I look at my life, I'm 48 years old now. Okay, I'm 48. I'm just getting started. I haven't peaked yet. But what I do now is I take all these relationships, I take all this experience, I take all this knowledge and wisdom that I have from all these years. Now I put it to good use, and I just continue to grow. And
Yeah.
and, and I'm just getting started. That's how I look at my life today. Or I could look at it like I'm going to retire and my career's over and I'm done because I've been doing this for 25 years and I'm burnt out. Nah, man, I'm fresh. I'm motivated. I got so much knowledge to share with everybody, and I know how to do this. I know how to work with artists and book tours and just represent talent, and I'm really good at it, and I love what I do, and I feel like I'm just getting started today, which is kind
Yeah,
of cool,
no, 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 across the board, right? So from sort of, helping Steven out at various points, trying to get him into rehab and sort of whatever happened in 2007. It's been an incredible career. And like you're saying, sort of you've been such an integral part of so many bands and sort of rock history. So, it'll be a shame if only the sort of 2007 incident gets highlighted.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Listen, the 2007. What incident are we talking about? The incident with
The
Steven, about me
Yeah, with
getting Steven,
Steven.
and
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's just a brother trying to save his older brother. At that point, it has nothing to do with him being a rock star. It has nothing to do with Guns N' Roses or any of this. Listen, let me tell you something. Me and my brother and mother, we're like this. Okay, we were the only two people in my brother's will. Okay, my brother owns 15% of Guns N' Roses music. Still to this day, he never sold his publishing. So it was just me and my mom were in his will. So if Steven died, I'm set for life. I own 15. I own his publishing all of a sudden. But I never wanted anything for free. I never wanted my brother's money. I like, if anybody knows me, I always wanted my brother to succeed. I wanted him back on top. I never wanted my brother to die. Like, that was never even a question. And there was the time in 2007 where if I didn't do what I did, he he would have been dead a week later. He would have been dead a week later. And I remember telling my mom this. I said, "Mom, you realize what I'm about to do? We're going to be X out of his will forever. But I don't give a shit because I don't want to own. I don't want my brother to die and then I own his publishing, because then I would have died. That's how I really believe. All that free money coming to me, I would have done something stupid. I didn't want to go out like that. But I still knew that that's what was going to happen. Either let him die that week or try to save his life. And of course, I opted with try to save his life, knowing that I could get arrested, I could go to jail, I'm going to get kicked out of his will. He might never talk to me again. There were so many scenarios that could have happened, but I was willing to do whatever it takes because that's my flesh and blood. And I couldn't fathom seeing my mom lose her son. And then that's when I put together a team around me, some guys that really love my family and love my mom and love me and that were willing to help. And we went and we gaffled up Steven. We held the guy hostage for the next month. Listen, he could have left. Sure, there was some incident. There was some the houses where I had him staying. They were locked from the inside. We had a lock from the inside, so he couldn't escape. But at the same time, we're taking Steven to the dentist. He could have told the dentist, call the cops.
Yeah.
He could have told the dentist, call the cops. He could have told the dentist. He could have ran. There was a lot of different scenarios, but deep down inside, Steven knew what we were doing was the best for him, and that we were doing this out of love. We weren't doing this to try to harm my brother. We were doing this to try to save him, and he knew this. He knew that, and that's why, as much as he fought us, one of the security guards we had, Steven punched. Steven did run away from our house one time, all the way to the 7-Eleven, and then our security caught up to Steven. Steven punched him, and then our security guard had to punch Steven, knock him out, bring him back to the house. And so there was some incidents like that. But for the most part, Steven stayed because he knew we were trying to help him. And what people don't know, because I didn't really elaborate in the story too much on Yahoo, but after the 30 days of Steven living with us, of us holding Steven down, feeding him the medicine, because we had to feed him this medicine for the next 30 days. After this happened, me, Slash, and the other guys, we showed up at the apartment in Van Nuys where Steven was staying at. It's day 30. And that's when Steven discovered I was involved, because Steven didn't know this whole time that I was behind all this. And me and Slash show up and what the fuck are you guys doing here? I fucking knew you guys were part of this, you fuckers. And then Steven says, you could keep me here for 30 days, 3 days, or 3 years. As soon as I leave here, I'm going to go get fucked up. And I look at Slash like, man, I'm sorry, Jamie, I tried. And Slash, that guy really went above and beyond for my brother. I'll never forget that. I love Slash for that. He was there when I needed him during those times. And I looked at my guys. I said, take him to Burbank Airport, drop him off. Because he was no longer green. He was healthy. You could tell that the blood infection was gone. So if this is what Steven wants to do, then let him. So my guys took him to Burbank Airport, dropped him off, and he was gone. Everybody just went through 30 days of hell. Okay, the people that were with Steven, the 30 days for Steven, for everybody. But we had to do this to clean out his system. Here's what people don't know. 5 months later is when we got the phone call. Steven saying, hey guys, can you please come back here and let's try that again? Because when Steven went back to Las Vegas after the 30 days, he went right back to the same bullshit. He was back again, smoking meth, smoking crack, doing whatever he's doing. And now he's all alone. He knows he's going to die. And he reached back out to us. And we did it again.
Minutes. Were you there when they got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Nah, man, I was really sad about that because I didn't get an invite. But, me and Steven weren't really talking at that point, but what year did they get inducted? Yeah, so trying to think. Okay, so
2012 maybe. I think 12 they got inducted, and 16 was that show in Argentina. I think that was that right? Or
yeah,
am I wrong?
so yeah, listen, he didn't invite me. I wanted to be part of that, but unfortunately I wasn't. He didn't even thank me on stage.
Yeah.
Don't and that hurt. But that's my brother. He I don't know, man. I love my brother. My brother is a great soul, but just sometimes his priorities are not in the right place. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
how do you not get up there at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and thank your mom and your brother and your dad, okay, who were there for you through the thick and thin? But it's okay, you
Absolutely.
know.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. I don't ever. I've never been that type of person, Vic, that needed credit. You know, people ask me, well, why did I do that story on Yahoo? Why? Because I want the entire world to know what I went through. You know, because if I never did that story, I'm going to die one day and no one's going to know my story. But I have a story, Vic. Everybody always says that they have a movie, like their life is a movie. Nah, my life is really a movie. And that's another thing, Vic. We need to figure out how to make the story into a movie because it's
Yep.
a freaking movie. That Yahoo story is beyond a movie. And I just I wanted to share it. I wanted to share my story with the world because it's a story that needed to be told. I sacrificed a lot. I went through a lot, you know, and I just I want to share that with I want my kids one day my children, Ronnie Mae, Jake, and Talia, they're gonna watch this
Yeah.
podcast that we're on right now. Maybe that's my dad. I want my girls to know what their father did. That I was
Yeah.
a selfless person, not a selfish person. I've never done anything for myself. Everything I've ever done, I've always done for others. It's never been about me.
Yeah.
I want my children to know that. When my children one day they're going to read that Yahoo story, they're going to know that all that these stories that their daddy told them, it was all true. You know, it sounds impossible. Like I literally was Nipsey Hussle, was one of the most legendary, iconic rap superstars. I was there the day he got discovered. I was his agent for his first 100 shows. For Nipsey Hussle, really? Well, anyone could say that. But no, my
Yeah.
stuff's documented. It's documented now. And
Yeah.
I do this for my children. You know, I want to have them I want to make a movie so I have a legacy, something for my children. That's why everything I do now I do for my kids. I want them to be proud of me. You know, and that's
Yeah.
why I did that story. I want something that they could be proud of. And you know, it's I've always held all this stuff inside. It's also very therapeutic when you're able to let it out.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
You know,
it's wonderful that you're doing things for yourself now and your family, and you've sort of left that world behind. So that's a
definitely,
good thing.
man. I've started a whole. I live. I'm on my second chapter of life. I lived my first
Yeah.
chapter, excess, craziness, gangster, rock, rap, all that stuff. Now I'm a
Yeah.
husband. I'm a father, and I'm a productive citizen living in Australia, living a normal life. I say I live in heaven on earth, and I'm living the dream now.